Naomi Carter had everything: success, power, and a first-class ticket on a luxury flight. But when she arrives at the airport, she's told something impossible: her reservation doesn't exist. Her name has been erased. What starts as an attempt to block her from boarding soon unravels into something far more sinister. Naomi isn't just facing discrimination, she's up against a hidden network of corruption, one that spans the entire airline industry and beyond. With the full force of a shadow organization working against her, Naomi refuses to back down. Instead, she fights back, uncovering a conspiracy so deep, so powerful, that even the most untouchable figures in government and business start to panic. They tried to erase her. Now she's about to erase them. This is the story of one woman taking on an empire and winning. Buckle up, this is going to be intense. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. And let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The polished floor of the VIP private jet lounge gleamed under the warm lighting, reflecting the effortless elegance of its elite guests. A symphony of hushed conversations and the occasional clinking of champagne glasses filled the air. Naomi Carter, a striking black woman with an air of quiet authority, walked in with the confidence of someone who had earned her place here. Dressed in a sleek navy blue pantsuit, she adjusted her gold-rimmed glasses and strode toward the front desk. The staff's eyes flickered toward her just for a second, but it was enough. The tension settled into her skin before anyone even spoke. Here we go. She had dealt with this before. A young employee, neatly dressed in an airline uniform, hesitated before offering a carefully rehearsed smile. "Good evening, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass?" Naomi handed over her phone with the digital first-class ticket displayed. The employee glanced at it, then up at her. And then it happened. "I'm sorry, but this lounge isn't reserved for your kind of travelers," he said smoothly, as if it were just another policy. Silence cracked through the room like a thunderclap. A slow, simmering anger ignited behind Naomi's eyes, but she remained composed. "Excuse me?" The young man shifted, his face blank with well-trained neutrality. "This lounge is for priority passengers only." A scoff cut through the air. Mr. Reynolds, a middle-aged white businessman in a tailored suit, smirked from his leather seat. "Oh, let me guess," he said with a chuckle. "You're about to make a scene, scream discrimination, and demand special treatment?" Several guests turned to watch, some amused, others uneasy. Naomi exhaled through her nose. "I don't demand respect. I command it." She turned her phone screen toward them. "First class. Verified." The employee frowned, tapping at his terminal. Then, confusion flickered across his face. "That's strange. The system isn't showing your name." Naomi's stomach nodded. "Check again." "I have." He cleared his throat. "Your reservation doesn't exist." A shiver ran down her spine. "No, this isn't a mistake. This is sabotage." Behind the desk, another staff member leaned in, whispering something to the first. Naomi's ears caught only part of it. Her name was removed this morning. Removed? A slow, cold dread seeped into Naomi's chest. Someone had deliberately erased her booking. And then, the final blows, the captain himself walked in. Captain David Harper, distinguished with a salt and pepper beard and an air of authority. His expression was carefully neutral, but his words cut deep. "Dr. Carter," he said, hands clasped behind his back, "I'm afraid we can't allow any disruptions before takeoff." Naomi's fingers curled into fists. "Disruptions?" she echoed. "Your situation has complications." His eyes flickered with something unreadable. "It's best if you step aside." A chill ran down Naomi's spine. This wasn't just an airline mistake. This was a deliberate execution of power. Her muscles coiled, her heart pounded. For the first time, she felt that someone had set her up. The only question was, who and why? But Naomi Carter never backed down. She calmly reached for her phone and dialed. The line connected almost instantly. "Activate Protocol Alpha," she said in a voice like steel. 30 seconds later, the entire airport's electronic screens glitched. Then, a bold red message flashed across every monitor. "Flight suspended due to racial discrimination investigation." Gasps filled the lounge. The ground beneath them was no longer stable. Naomi had just changed the game. And this was only the beginning. A hush fell over the VIP lounge as the massive digital screens flickered ominously, displaying the bold red text that no one could ignore. "Flight suspended due to racial discrimination investigation." For the first few seconds, disbelief hung in the air like thick smoke. Then, the inevitable chaos erupted. Passengers pulled out their phones, snapping photos of the screens, whispering furiously. A few gasps of outrage rang out, some in support, others in frustration. Airline staff scrambled behind the counter, frantically tapping at their terminals. Naomi Carter stood still in the eye of the storm. Unshaken. She could feel the weight of Captain Harper's stare, his authority suddenly fragile under the weight of the message blaring across the airport. He knew this was bigger than an erased booking now. From his seat, Mr. Reynolds slammed his drink onto the table, his face twisted in disdain. "This is ridiculous. Some woke nonsense, shutting down the entire airport? You think you can just..." Naomi cut him off with a slow, deliberate turn of her head. Her gaze locked onto him like a hawk spotting prey. "I don't think, Mr. Reynolds." She stepped forward. "I know." He scoffed, but there was something else in his eyes now, hesitation. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a disagreement in an airport lounge. This was a federal investigation taking place in real time. Then came the next blow. A mechanical voice crackled through the intercom system. "Attention all passengers. This airport is now under temporary lockdown. Federal agents are en route. Please remain calm." A fresh wave of panic swept through the crowd. Lockdown? Agents? This was escalating fast. Naomi's phone vibrated in her palm. She glanced at the screen. A single message from an unknown number. "We see it. We're moving in. Hold your ground." She exhaled slowly. Right on time. Across the room, the first ripple of power shifted. The smug confidence of the airline employees began to crack, their eyes darting nervously as they whispered to each other. The young agent who had denied Naomi's entry turned pale. They were losing control, and Naomi Carter was just getting started. A squad of federal agents entered the lounge, dressed in sharp black suits, their badges flashing under the bright airport lights. Their presence alone was enough to silence the room. Naomi didn't even flinch. The lead agent, a tall black woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority, stepped forward. "Dr. Carter?" Naomi nodded. The agent extended her hand. "Agent Camille Brooks, Federal Aviation Oversight. We received your distress signal." Captain Harper, finally breaking from his stunned silence, stepped up. "This is unnecessary," he said tightly. "Whatever misunderstanding is happening here, we can handle it internally." Agent Brooks didn't even look at him. She turned to Naomi. "What happened?" Naomi didn't rush. She let the weight of the moment settle before she spoke. "My first-class ticket was erased from the system. My name was removed from the manifest this morning before I even arrived. I was denied access to a service I paid for. I was told," she cut a glance toward the young employee at the counter, who looked ready to melt into the floor, "that this space wasn't for people like me." Agent Brooks' jaw tensed. "You have proof?" Naomi handed over her phone. The receipts, the confirmation emails, the digital ticket, screenshots of her boarding pass, and most importantly her security camera footage from her private network, showing that her name had been deleted at 6:45 a.m. Agent Brooks turned to her team. "Pull the airport's internal data logs. I want to know who deleted this reservation and under whose orders. The atmosphere turned suffocating. Captain Harper clenched his jaw. "Now listen, I'd advise you to remain silent." Agent Brooks cut him off. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was razor-sharp. "Until we determine the extent of your involvement." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed Harper's face. Naomi folded her arms. She wasn't just exposing one corrupt employee. She was exposing an entire system. Minutes later, one of the federal agents returned, holding a tablet. He leaned into Brooks' ear, whispering something urgent. Then, Brooks turned the screen toward the group. A security footage recording played. It showed the airport manager, a man in a gray suit, standing at the terminal office. He was deleting Naomi's name from the first-class passenger list. And beside him, Mr. Reynolds. A gasp rippled through the room. Naomi tilted her head. "Well, that explains a lot." Reynolds' face drained of color. "I don't know what." Agent Brooks raised a hand. "Save it. You're coming with us." Two agents stepped forward. Reynolds bolted for the exit. But he didn't get far. A third agent caught him, pinning his arms behind his back as they slapped cuffs on his wrists. "You're under federal investigation for conspiracy and discrimination under civil aviation laws." Naomi exhaled, finally allowing herself a slow, victorious smile. But this wasn't over yet. Because if one airline executive had the power to erase a name from the system, how many others had done the same? And more importantly, who else was pulling the strings behind the scenes? Naomi stood unmoving as federal agents hauled Mr. Reynolds away. His protests, once sharp with arrogance, had dwindled into desperate, breathless stammering. The scene unfolded like a carefully orchestrated play, except Naomi hadn't just played the game. She had rewritten the rules. But she wasn't fooled. Reynolds was nothing more than a disposable piece in a much larger scheme. The real power didn't sit in first-class lounges or behind airport terminals. It sat higher, and she was about to find out exactly who had tried to erase her. Agent Camille Brooks studied Naomi carefully, her dark eyes calculating. "You knew something like this might happen," she said, more statement than question. Naomi allowed herself a smirk. "I didn't know how it would happen, but I knew someone would try." Brooks crossed her arms. "That wasn't just a someone, Dr. Carter. That was a planned operation. The fact that we traced Reynolds back to an internal system breach means he wasn't working alone," Naomi finished. A sharp nod from Brooks. Naomi turned toward the nearest security monitor. The flight suspension notices still flashed across every screen, disrupting the airport's normal rhythm. Travelers murmured in growing frustration. Airline officials huddled in anxious clusters. The higher-ups were scrambling, and Naomi relished it. But she didn't have time to celebrate. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She pressed accept and brought it to her ear. "Carter." A deep male voice hummed through the receiver. "I warned you, Naomi." Her blood ran cold. She knew this voice. Slow, controlled, infuriatingly calm. Howard Lancaster, CEO of AeroGlobe Airlines, the very company that had erased her from their records. Her grip tightened. "Howard, I was wondering when you'd show your face." A soft chuckle. "I don't need to show my face to remind you of the balance, Naomi. You rattled the wrong cage." "Wrong." Naomi's lips curled. "I think I rattled the right one." A pause. Then Lancaster's voice dropped an octave. "You're making enemies you can't afford." Naomi's free hand curled into a fist. She forced herself to remain calm. "You mean people like you? You erased my name because I was inconvenient." "That was a warning," Lancaster said smoothly. "But you've made this much bigger." Behind her, Agent Brooks watched the exchange with quiet intensity. Naomi turned, locking eyes with her, then placed the call on speaker. Lancaster didn't hesitate. "I have a fleet of aircraft, Carter. Thousands of employees, government contracts, investors. You think shutting down one flight, one airport changes anything?" A slow, menacing chuckle. You're playing checkers, Naomi. I play chess. Agent Brooks stepped closer. Howard Lancaster, you're speaking on an open federal line. I strongly suggest you choose your next words carefully. Silence. Then Lancaster sighed, almost amused. Ah, the feds. Always late to the party. Naomi didn't waver. I don't think you understand, Howard. Her voice was silk-wrapped steel. You erased my name, but I just erased your flight operations. Do you know what happens when an airline is placed under a racial discrimination probe? Silence stretched. Naomi continued. Your stock tanks. Your shareholders panic. Your federal contracts get reevaluated. And suddenly, you're bleeding money. A slow inhale from Lancaster's end. Then, soft and venomous. You've made a mistake, Carter. Naomi smiled. And yet, I'm still standing. The call disconnected. Agent Brooks let out a low whistle. Well, that was subtle. Naomi slipped her phone back into her blazer. He's testing me? He's threatening you. A small shrug. Same thing. Brooks folded her arms. You sure you want to go after someone this powerful? Naomi exhaled, rolling her shoulders. Let me ask you something, Agent Brooks. She turned fully to face her. What happens when we don't go after people like Lancaster? Brooks didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both knew the truth. Men like Lancaster thrived in silence. Not this time. Naomi tapped her chin. He's arrogant. He won't believe I can touch him. Brooks smirked. Can you? Naomi Carter smiled. I already have. Before the dust could settle, a new notification flashed across the airport screens. It was a government-issued cease and desist order. Breaking news. Aeroglobe Airlines under federal inquiry. Stock plummets 14% in early trading. CEO Howard Lancaster under investigation. Gasps echoed through the lounge. Somewhere, Howard Lancaster was watching. And, for the first time, he knew he was losing. But Naomi wasn't done yet. Because if Lancaster thought she was a problem now, he had no idea what was coming next. Naomi Carter had spent years navigating corporate battlegrounds. But this was a war. A war fought not with weapons, but with leverage. With strategy. With precision strikes that shattered the illusion of power. Howard Lancaster had underestimated her. Now, he was scrambling. The airport remained in lockdown. The massive digital screens flashed the breaking news headline on a loop. Aeroglobe Airlines under federal inquiry. CEO Howard Lancaster under investigation. Stock plummets 14%. The weight of those words hung in the air, pressing down on the very foundation of the airline empire Lancaster had built. And Naomi knew this was only the beginning. Agent Camille Brooks, standing beside her, tapped at her tablet, scanning fresh intel. We've pulled internal communications from Aeroglobe's executive servers. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. You might want to see this. Naomi took the tablet. Her eyes scanned the email's top-level exchanges between Lancaster and his board. Carter is a liability. We need to ensure she doesn't make it onto that plane. Erase her from the system. No record, no problem. If she pushes back, delay her. Security will handle the rest. Naomi's grip on the tablet tightened. They hadn't just erased her ticket. They had planned to erase her. A slow burn ignited in her chest, not rage, not fear. Determination. They were prepared to do more than just humiliate me, she murmured. Brooks nodded. This wasn't just about discrimination. This was corporate suppression. She leaned in, lowering her voice. And if they've done it to you, they've done it to others. Naomi finished the thought, her mind racing. How many other black professionals, how many other marginalized travelers had been quietly erased from their flights, denied their rightful access, without the power to fight back? This was bigger than one ticket. It was a systemic crime hiding in plain sight. Naomi exhaled sharply. We take this public. Not just Aeroglobe, all of it. Brooks hesitated. Naomi, if you expose this, you're putting a target on your back. Naomi's lips curled. They already took the shot. She straightened. Now I'm firing back. Moments later, Naomi's phone vibrated. An anonymous tip had arrived in her inbox. She opened it. A single link led to a hidden archive of Aeroglobe's blacklisted passengers, hundreds of names, erased without reason. One detail stood out. At the top of the list, Naomi Carter, and beneath her, names of other high-profile Black executives, activists, and public figures. She turned the screen toward Brooks. This isn't just a scandal. Brooks inhaled sharply. This is a federal case. Naomi didn't waste another second. She forwarded the archive to every major news outlet. Then, she made one final call. To Howard Lancaster. The line clicked. For a moment, silence. Then, Lancaster's voice calm, but no longer confident. Naomi. She smiled coldly. Howard. A pause. Then he spoke. Measured. Controlled. You think this will bring me down? Naomi leaned against the counter. Relaxed. No, another pause. I know it will. Lancaster exhaled sharply, just barely masking his frustration. You've started something you can't stop. Naomi's voice was ice. Howard, I started something you can't stop. The sound of movement papers shuffling, a distant voice in the background. Lancaster was scrambling. Naomi let the silence stretch. Let him feel the weight of his own downfall settling in. Then, she delivered the final blow. Aeroglobe is collapsing, Howard, she said, her voice a silken blade. Your stock is crashing. Your investors are pulling out. And in 20 minutes, she glanced at her watch. The Department of Justice is announcing an official lawsuit against you. Lancaster's breath hitched. Naomi smirked. Checkmate. He tried to recover. I have powerful people behind me. Naomi let out a small laugh. And I have the truth. Guess which one lasts longer. Silence. Then, Lancaster's voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know the real players in this game. Naomi's smirk faded. There it was. The truth behind the truth. Lancaster wasn't the end of the line. He was just a pawn in a bigger game. And now, Naomi had their attention. The call disconnected. Naomi stared at the screen, her mind already racing. Behind her, Brooks asked, What did he mean by that? Naomi exhaled slowly. He means we're only at the tip of the iceberg. Before she could say another word, every news channel in the country began broadcasting the same headline. Department of Justice files discrimination lawsuit against Aeroglobe Airlines. Naomi turned to Brooks. They thought they could erase me. Brooks smirked. Instead, you erased them. The airport erupted in murmurs. Gasps. Some people cheered. Others panicked. But Naomi? She stayed calm, because she knew something no one else did. Aeroglobe was just the beginning. And whatever forces Lancaster had hinted at, they were watching her now. And soon, she'd be watching them. The moment the DOJ lawsuit hit the news cycle, Aeroglobe Airlines began to collapse in real time. Stockholders panicked. Social media exploded. High-ranking executives started resigning overnight, attempting to distance themselves from the scandal of the century. But Naomi Carter wasn't celebrating, because Howard Lancaster's last words haunted her. You don't know the real players in this game. That wasn't an empty threat. It was a warning. And Naomi wasn't foolish enough to ignore it. Agent Camille Brooks sat across from Naomi at a secured federal office. The DOJ had insisted on bringing Naomi in for protection after all. She'd just exposed one of the biggest corporate crimes in modern history. But Naomi wasn't here to hide. She was here to plan her next move. Brooks slid a folder across the table. This came from our cyber forensics team. Thought you might want to see it. Naomi opened it. Inside were documents, transaction logs, and most importantly, connections. Aeroglobe Airlines wasn't just an airline. It was a front. Her eyes scanned the names. Some she recognized politicians, business moguls, even a former Secretary of Transportation. But one name stood out. Naomi's pulse slowed. Orion Strategic Group, a global investment firm with ties to government contracts, aviation, and infrastructure. If AeroGlobe was a pawn, Orion was the hand that moved the pieces. Brooks tapped the page. Keller's firm has invested in nearly every major airline, including AeroGlobe. He sits on multiple advisory boards tied to airspace regulation. And she hesitated. He has deep political ties. People who could make problems like this disappear. Naomi exhaled. So when I took down AeroGlobe, I wasn't just costing Lancaster his empire. I was disrupting Keller's entire network. Brooks nodded grimly. And I guarantee you he's already making moves to shut you down. As if on cue, Naomi's phone vibrated. An anonymous message. You have 24 hours to walk away. Orion doesn't lose. Brooks leaned over. You were just officially warned off. Naomi smirked. If they're threatening me, it means I hit something vital. Brooks, however, wasn't smiling. Naomi, you need to understand something. Orion Strategic Group isn't just a company. It's a syndicate. They play senators. They influence policies. You just made an enemy of the architects of global aviation. Naomi's mind sharpened. She'd gone from fighting an airline executive to challenging a hidden empire. And that meant one thing. She needed leverage. Naomi stood, her mind racing. If Orion is behind this, we need proof, real proof. Something that connects them to AeroGlobe's blacklisting scheme. Brooks hesitated. That's not going to be easy. Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line. Good thing I don't do easy. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. One name stood out, a former whistleblower who had worked inside high-level corporate finance. She hit dial. A voice answered. Carter. Naomi's voice was steel. Javier, I need everything you have on Orion Strategic Group. Now. A sharp inhale. Then, two chilling words. You sure? Naomi's heartbeat slowed. Yes. A pause. Then you need to meet me. And you need to come alone. Later that night, Naomi arrived at an abandoned parking structure. In downtown D.C., Javier Cortez was waiting. He was nervous, shifting from foot to foot, his hoodie pulled tight over his head. You have no idea what you're getting into, he muttered. Naomi crossed her arms. Then enlighten me. Javier glanced around, then handed her a flash drive. This is every offshore transaction Orion made in the last 2 years. Money funneled through shell companies, backdoor payments to lawmakers. And most importantly, he hesitated. Naomi's eyes narrowed. What? Javier exhaled. A contract. Naomi's grip on the drive tightened. What kind of contract? Javier's voice was barely above a whisper. A contract to have you eliminated. The world tilted. For the first time, the danger became real. Naomi wasn't just up against corporate corruption anymore. She was on a hit list. She should have been scared. She should have turned back. But Naomi Carter didn't retreat. She strategized. She held up the flash drive. Javier, if I expose this, Orion won't just come after me. They'll come after you. Javier swallowed hard. They already are. Naomi met his gaze. Then let's hit them before they hit us. Javier hesitated. Then he nodded. And just like that, Naomi Carter declared war on the Shadow Syndicate. At that exact moment, across the city, Morgan Keller sat in his glass-walled penthouse, watching the breaking news. His assistant entered, face pale. Sir, Carter's moving faster than expected. Keller steepled his fingers. Then we move faster. The assistant hesitated. She has the files. Keller exhaled through his nose. Of course she does. A long pause. Then Keller's voice turned cold. Then make sure she doesn't live long enough to use them. Naomi Carter maneuvered through the quiet streets of Washington, D.C., her mind racing. The flash drive in her pocket felt heavier than its physical weight. It contained the truth evidence that could expose Orion Strategic Group's influence over the aviation industry. But now she was no longer just an investigator. She was a target. Javier's warning echoed in her mind. Orion doesn't fight fair. When you become a problem, they make sure you disappear. Naomi knew what that meant. She wasn't just up against a corporation anymore. She was up against a network powerful enough to silence anyone who threatened them. Her phone vibrated. A message flashed across the screen. Unknown number. Pull over. Now. A chill ran down her spine. Naomi glanced at her rearview mirror. The road behind her was clear. Nothing seemed out of place. Then her instincts flared. Something was wrong. She acted immediately. Without hesitation, she turned sharply down a narrow side street, pressing the accelerator. That was the right call, because the moment she changed course, a black SUV appeared from nowhere, speeding into the lane she had just left. Naomi's pulse quickened. They were following her. She didn't panic. Panic led to mistakes. Instead, she calculated. She couldn't outrun them forever, but she could outthink them. Ahead, she spotted an upcoming construction zone. That'll work. Naomi pushed the car faster, heading toward the partially built parking structure. The SUV followed. That was exactly what she needed. Weaving through the steel framework, Naomi maneuvered her way deeper into the site, where the unfinished floors created tight corners. She knew the space whoever was behind her did not. The SUV attempted to match her moves, but the driver wasn't as precise. The vehicle scraped against a concrete barrier, slowing down. Naomi seized the opening. She veered toward a stack of metal scaffolding, positioned at a precarious angle. Just as she passed it, she clipped the edge. Crash. The scaffolding tumbled over, blocking the path behind her. By the time her pursuers recovered, Naomi was gone. Several blocks away, Naomi pulled into an underground parking lot, her breath steady despite the intensity of what had just happened. She checked her phone. A new message. Agent Camille Brooks. Find a secure location. We need to talk now. Naomi clenched her jaw. She had proof against Orion. She had a witness in Javier. And now, she had confirmation that someone wanted her off the board. She couldn't wait any longer. It was time to strike first. Naomi Carter didn't scare easily, but she wasn't reckless either. Whoever had been chasing her in that black SUV wasn't just trying to intimidate her. They wanted her gone. She had made a dangerous enemy in Orion's strategic group. And now, she was running out of places to hide. Naomi pulled into an underground parking garage, her grip steady on the wheel. The dim overhead lights cast flickering shadows against the cold concrete walls. She checked her phone. A message from Agent Camille Brooks. Level 3. Blue sedan. Get in fast. Naomi didn't waste time. She grabbed the flash drive, stepped out of her car, and made her way to the designated vehicle. The sedan's tinted windows gave no hint of what or who was inside. Then, the back door unlocked. Naomi slipped inside. Agent Brooks sat in the driver's seat, expression serious. You're late. Naomi smirked. Had to shake some company. Brooks glanced at Naomi's car in the distance. You weren't followed? I made sure of it. Brooks gave a short nod, then pulled the car out of the garage, merging into late-night traffic. Only after they were several blocks away did she finally speak. What's on the drive? Naomi handed it over. Everything. Orion's financial trails, government contracts, and, she hesitated, a directive. One with my name on it. Brooks' grip on the wheel tightened. A directive for what? Naomi's voice was calm, but sharp. Let's just say they weren't planning to take me to court. They drove for nearly an hour, winding through DC's back roads until Brooks finally turned onto a secluded street. A modest brownstone townhouse sat tucked between two abandoned properties, its windows dark. Stay low, Brooks instructed. Naomi followed her inside. The interior was sparse bare walls, a simple desk, and a few locked filing cabinets. A government safe house, no doubt. Brooks secured the door, then placed the flash drive into a secure laptop. The screen illuminated with data, scrolling endlessly. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the files. "This is deeper than I thought," she murmured. Naomi leaned over. "What did you find?" Brooks clicked on a hidden folder, revealing a classified memo from Orion's internal security team. Priority alert target, Naomi Carter status. Threat 2 operations directive. Neutralize immediately. A cold silence filled the room. Brooks exhaled sharply. "This is bad." Naomi crossed her arms. "I know." Brooks turned to her. "This isn't just about Aero Globe. Orion is controlling entire sectors, not just aviation, but transportation, energy, and security. You've disrupted something much bigger than you realized." Naomi absorbed the information, her mind already moving several steps ahead. "Then we need to go bigger," she said firmly. Brooks hesitated. "You understand what that means?" Naomi met her gaze. Unshaken, unwavering. "It means we don't just expose them." She grabbed her phone, ready to make her next move. "We dismantle them." Before Brooks could respond, the room's security monitor flashed red. A perimeter alert. Brooks froze, then reached for her weapon. "We have company." Naomi didn't flinch. She knew this was coming. Orion wouldn't wait for her to make the first move. They were here. Now. Naomi's pulse remained steady. Because she wasn't trapped. She was prepared. And when Orion stepped through that door, she would be waiting for them. The security monitors in the safe house pulsed red, signaling an alert. Outside, figures moved in the shadows. Agent Camille Brooks quickly secured the flash drive containing the evidence against Orion's strategic group. "They're here," she murmured. Naomi Carter didn't flinch. She watched the shadows shifting outside, analyzing the movements. 4 individuals. They weren't here to negotiate. She turned to Brooks. "How secure is this place?" Brooks checked the door locks. "It'll hold for a while. But if they force their way in," Naomi finished for her, "then we don't let them take the lead." A slow smirk played at Brooks' lips. "You thinking offense?" Naomi nodded. "Always." Outside, a voice projected through a concealed speaker. "Ms. Carter, we need to have a conversation." It was smooth, professional, a tone belonging to someone used to control. Naomi pressed a button on the external intercom. "Like the conversation you tried to have with me earlier?" A pause. Then the voice responded, measured. "You've put yourself in a difficult position." Naomi chuckled. "No, I put you in one." Another pause. Then, "Last chance. Open the door." A faint click came from the front lock. Someone was trying to bypass the security system. Brooks moved quickly, positioning herself near the entryway. "They're professionals." Naomi remained calm. "So are we." The lock disengaged. The door handle turned. Brooks acted first. She triggered the emergency security measure, setting off the disorienting alarm system. The sudden flashing lights and high-frequency sound threw off their coordination. The first individual stepped in cautiously. Naomi moved first. She caught his arm, redirecting his movement and shifting his balance, causing him to stumble back against the doorframe. Before he could recover, Brooks reinforced the move, ensuring he wouldn't continue forward. The remaining individuals hesitated outside. For the first time, the calm voice lost its patience. "Restrain them, now." Naomi and Brooks exchanged a glance. "They expected compliance," Brooks muttered. Naomi smirked. "Then let's keep surprising them." With the security system still active, they used the brief confusion to move toward the alternate exit. Their pursuers, momentarily thrown off, hesitated just long enough. Naomi grabbed the flash drive from the secured laptop, and within moments, they had reached the basement escape route. As the reinforcements outside moved in, The safe house was already empty except for the blinking laptop screen, left open deliberately. A message glowed across it, "Not fast enough." From a concealed location a few blocks away, Naomi and Brooks caught their breath. Brooks shook her head. "You enjoy challenging powerful people, don't you?" Naomi let out a short laugh. "Only when they try to erase the truth." The night wasn't over. Orion now knew she had the evidence. They understood she wasn't intimidated, which meant one thing: they would try again. Naomi looked at Brooks. "We need to move first." Brooks nodded. "What's next?" Naomi's eyes gleamed. "We take the fight to them." Naomi Carter sat in the dimly lit back seat of an unmarked vehicle, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the flash drive in her palm. Beside her, Agent Camille Brooks navigated through the quiet D.C. streets, taking an unpredictable route to ensure they weren't being followed. "We can't stay in one place for long," Brooks said, glancing at the rearview mirror. "Orion's already proven they move fast." Naomi nodded. "Then we move faster." She had spent too long reacting. It was time to seize control. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a secure operations center and off-the-books intelligence hub known only to a select few within federal circles. A small team of trusted analysts awaited them, already scanning through the data Naomi had extracted from Orion's files. Brooks leaned over a workstation, watching lines of code and encrypted messages scroll across the screen. "Find anything yet?" One of the analysts, a sharp-eyed woman named Maya, nodded. "Oh, we found something all right." She pulled up financial transaction logs accounts linked to Orion Strategic Group. But it wasn't just about airline contracts. Orion was funneling money into multiple industries: transportation, security, and even key government contracts. And then Maya revealed the most important: discovery. "This isn't just about controlling the aviation sector," she said. "Orion has been placing people in regulatory agencies, ensuring they make decisions in favor of their investments." Naomi's mind clicked into place. "They weren't just removing me from a flight," she murmured. "They were protecting their entire infrastructure." Brooks exhaled. "And now that we have this, what's our next move?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "We make it public." Within the hour, Naomi's team compiled a detailed report evidence that Orion had been influencing policy decisions, securing untouchable contracts, and eliminating opposition in subtle but effective ways. Brooks hesitated. "You know this will set off alarms, right?" Naomi smirked. "Good." She sent the report to a select list of investigative journalists and whistleblower networks. Moments later, the first headline appeared online: "Exposed: Orion Strategic Group's secret influence in aviation and security." It didn't take long for major news outlets to pick up the story. The internet erupted. Social media exploded with demands for answers. Government officials started receiving calls for an investigation. Orion had spent years operating in the shadows. Now, they were being dragged into the light. But Naomi knew they wouldn't go down quietly. Her phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number: "You should have walked away." Brooks read over her shoulder. "They're trying to intimidate you." Naomi locked eyes with her. "Then they're wasting their time." Across the city, in a high-rise boardroom, Morgan Keller, CEO of Orion Strategic Group, stood watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. One of his senior advisors swallowed nervously. "What's the next step?" Keller's expression remained unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he turned to his assistant. "Call our contacts. We silence this now." Naomi and Brooks had anticipated a counterattack. They had already moved locations, making sure no digital trace could lead Orion's forces to them. Maya checked her screens. "They're trying to suppress the news, but it's spreading too fast." Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Javier, her insider source. She answered. "Tell me you have something." Javier's voice was urgent. Orion scrambling, but Keller's planning something bigger. I just intercepted a meeting request. He's calling in a favor from a high-ranking government official. Naomi's breath slowed. Who? Javier hesitated. Then, Senator Markham. Naomi's stomach tightened. Senator Markham was one of the most influential voices in national security and corporate regulation. If Orion had his backing, they wouldn't just try to suppress the story. They would try to discredit her completely. She looked at Brooks. We have one last move left. Brooks narrowed her eyes. What are you thinking? Naomi's voice was calm, but unyielding. We confront Keller directly. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You want to walk into the lion's den? Naomi smiled. No. I want to burn it down from the inside. Javier sent over the details. Keller had scheduled a closed-door meeting at a high-security private club in the city. Naomi's plan was simple. She would be in that meeting. Before Brooks could argue, Naomi continued. If I don't show up, they move in secret. They erase evidence, change the narrative, and buy their way out of accountability. She met Brooks' gaze. But if I walk through that door? A slow, determined smirk. They won't have time to react. Brooks sighed, rubbing her temples. This is reckless. Naomi's expression didn't waver. This is necessary. Brooks exhaled sharply, then finally nodded. Then let's make sure you walk in prepared. Naomi checked her watch. She had 2 hours before the meeting, and she had one final card left to play. Naomi Carter stood outside the Harrington Club, an exclusive, members-only establishment in Washington, D.C. The dimly lit entrance, flanked by 2 security guards in tailored suits, radiated quiet authority. Inside, Morgan Keller, CEO of Orion Strategic Group, was meeting with Senator Markham. This wasn't a routine business discussion. This was Orion's last attempt to silence her. And Naomi wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to end them. Agent Camille Brooks had argued against Naomi going in alone. But Naomi had insisted. This is the only way, she had said. Now, as she walked up to the entrance, a guard stepped in front of her. Members only. Naomi smirked, pulling out a platinum access card, one she had borrowed from a high-profile Orion associate whose digital records were already in flames. The guard scanned the card. The green light blinked. Enjoy your evening, Ms. Carter. She stepped inside. The club's inner sanctum was a world of whispered deals and quiet conspiracies. Naomi's heels barely made a sound on the marble floors as she approached the private suite Keller had reserved. Inside, Morgan Keller sat at the head of an oak conference table, his expression carefully neutral. Senator Markham sat beside him, his jaw tight with impatience. The moment she walked in, all conversation stopped. Keller leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp. You have nerve showing up here. Naomi smiled. I get that a lot. Markham frowned. Ms. Carter, if you think you can intimidate us into backing down, Naomi cut him off, sliding a tablet onto the table. The screen displayed Orion's financial records, complete with transactions linked to Markham's political campaigns. You thought I came here to intimidate you? Naomi asked, voice smooth as silk. Keller's gaze darkened. What do you want? Naomi leaned forward. You've spent years buying influence, controlling policies, erasing obstacles. But tonight, she gestured to the tablet. You're the ones who are exposed. Markham's fingers twitched. You wouldn't dare. Naomi tapped the screen. This file is already in the hands of the DOJ, multiple news outlets, and a congressional oversight committee. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But I haven't given them everything. A flicker of concern crossed Keller's face. What do you mean? Naomi's smile was razor-sharp. You know exactly what I mean? Because buried deep in the files was something even Keller hadn't expected to be uncovered. Not just financial corruption, but classified defense contracts, ones that Orion had manipulated to divert government funds into private hands. If this information went public, it wouldn't just be a corporate scandal. It would be a national crisis. For the first time, Markham looked nervous. This can be handled, the senator said carefully. If you're willing to be reasonable. Naomi tilted her head. Define reasonable. Markham hesitated. There are opportunities for someone with your expertise. A chance to be part of the system rather than fighting against it. Naomi laughed softly. You think I went through all this just so I could take a bribe? Markham's face darkened. Keller, however, was watching her closely. He wasn't panicking. He was calculating. Finally, he spoke. What do you really want, Carter? Naomi's voice didn't waver. I want Orion dismantled. Silence. Then Keller exhaled slowly. That's not going to happen. Naomi smirked. It already is. She pressed a button on the tablet. A news alert flashed across the screen. Breaking news. Orion Strategic Group under federal investigation. Senator Markham linked to corporate corruption. Markham's face drained of color. Keller's jaw tightened. You just signed your own death warrant. Naomi met his gaze without blinking. No. I just signed yours. Security guards stormed into the room. But they weren't here for Naomi. They were here for Markham. One of the club's senior staff stepped forward, holding a phone to his ear. Senator, there's a federal warrant for your arrest. Markham turned to Keller, his voice panicked. Do something. But Keller didn't move, because he knew. Naomi had won. Markham was escorted out. The scandal would bury him. His career was over. Keller, however, remained composed. You think this ends with me? He asked quietly. Naomi's expression was unreadable. No, then she leaned in, lowering her voice. But it starts with you. Keller's smirk faltered just slightly. For the first time, he realized he was truly alone. Naomi exited the club, stepping into the cool night air. Agent Brooks was waiting in a car across the street. That went well. Naomi smirked. Markham is finished. Orion's operations are compromised. Keller will try to rebuild, but his network is shattered. Brooks nodded. And you? Naomi exhaled, looking at the city skyline. I've spent my career exposing corruption. She glanced at Brooks. But now? I'm going to eradicate it. Brooks smiled. Then let's get to work. The fight wasn't over. But tonight, Naomi Carter had changed the game forever. Naomi Carter just took down one of the most powerful corporate syndicates in the world, but corruption never sleeps. What do you think happens next? Should she go even bigger? Let us know where in the world you're watching from. Drop your country or city in the comments. And if you love high-stakes, action-packed stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.